Hello and welcome to another episode of the Storied Arcs podcast. I'm your co-host Mike.
And I'm your co-host Alex.
And today we are wrapping up our discussion of Homesick Pilots with Volume 3. It has a title, but my app crashed right as we started. Do you have the title on hand?
3 chords in the end of the world.
3 chords in the end of the world, that's right. Which is basically the line that it ends with, right?
It's the sentiment that it ends with, although it's not the end of the world. And not even for our characters, but yes, it is a fitting sentiment, fitting tag for the end of the story.
So should we just jump ahead to the end because we
might as well.
We've all read it. Let's not pretend otherwise.
Yeah. So I guess so we had discussed this early on, in specific reference to all of the narration we were hearing, right? All the narration was very clearly Ami, and it was very clearly in the past tense. She was talking about things that had happened, this happened, and then, oh, wait, no, something, so like she was narrating from some time in the future. And we were discussing on, what does that mean? Does that mean, is it still her in the future? Is she dead in the future? Is she a ghost in the future? Like we've seen. So when we got to that point, what was your reaction to, can we call it a twist? Can we call it a twist in like scare quotes?
It's a yes. Yeah.
Or twist or reveal, regardless of if we call it a twist or a reveal or whatever it is. What was your reaction to it? And I guess also like at what point, if you did have a point prior, did you clock that was the twist?
So I kind of assumed everyone was going to die. I just thought there are very few scenarios where you bond yourself to a demon, ghost, spirit, whatever, and then go back to normal life. Like either you're tethered to this thing in some type of Jacob Marley existence where it's like, yeah, I'm not dead, I'm still here, but it would be better to be dead, or you just die. And then when it came down to in this arc, it was very clear, like it is up to this crew to save the world from this thing. I was like, okay, well, if the world has to be saved and these characters have to die, they might as well die saving the world. It was basically my logic. So I was certainly not surprised by it. I'd be much more surprised if any of them lived. Although I did think hilarious line when the drummer gets cut and he's like, it's always the drummer, man.
Yeah.
Unreplaceable.
Right after the battle. Yeah. So I guess the thing that along your lines there, I guess I didn't put any thought into like how I thought the book quote unquote should end. What you're saying makes a lot of sense. So this idea that simply by them getting involved with all of this kind of means they only have one end. And now that you say that makes a whole lot of sense to me. But I think what I like about it now that you see what the end is, I like that they did ultimately die for saving the world, but they didn't die in the battle.
Right.
No, there was no sacrifice in the battle.
Yeah.
They were in the house. They saw what their situation was, and from there understood kind of what the last mission was, which was the fact that they were already dead. It was them letting go, I guess, right? Like leaving this plane of existence and moving on to whatever's next, the thing that all these ghosts couldn't do in the house. And so I liked that portrayal of the sacrifice, that it wasn't like it wasn't the big mech battle at the end where you would traditionally think of someone sacrificing themselves in that way, that it was they had stopped it. They had saved the world, or at least at the very least had contained it, and understood that they could still affect change in the house, even as some of them died before others, right? Like some of them were alive, because if we look at the timeline there, right? Like Rip says like, yeah, I passed out immediately and was dead like 10 days in. And then Buzz talks about how after they found the remnants of the nuclear bastard, he touched it and died. So like that there was a progression of them being alive in the house and then dying as they are trying to figure out how to destroy and stop the house and free these ghosts. And so I like that level of I like that portrayal of their sacrifice for the end.
Yeah, I think it redeemed the characters who had made questionable, all of them made questionable
Yes.
decisions.
Yeah.
Maybe I forget his name, Buck, not Buck. Not Rip, not Ami, the other homesick
Buzz.
pilot. Buzz.
Yeah.
I don't know if Buzz was ever really morally compromised, other than, donning the armor of the shoehorn guy.
Yeah, well, but I think in that way, though, the first time he did that, that was kind of out of necessity. It happened before he knew what was going on, and it did kind of save him in that moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say of our four main characters, I guess, right? Rip, Buzz, Ami, and Meg. Buzz is the least tainted, I guess. Yeah, no, I think it does do a good job there, and I think we've already we'd seen Ami's kind of road to stepping up. We saw that at the end of last volume, like her choosing to go back in the house. That was her making a sacrifice for something larger, for standing up for a cause, something, understanding that she had an ability and a power. So we started seeing some of that redemption. I do think, I guess it was nice that Rip got some redemption because Rip was pretty terrible. I did like that when we had the little time jump in the house, that he was the one that found Meg and brought her into the plan, because the only thing we saw of him prior was in volume 2 last week, when him and Meg were with System Disrupt, and he attempted to get Meg out of there. It's like
Right.
he tried to save her.
It was in no way suggested that he had her best interests at heart.
Well,
with the System Disrupt thing.
Oh yeah, no. I think it was a matter of like, he was trying to formulate a plan, right? He was like, oh, I'll play along, I'll learn what they got here, and then I'll get Megan. We got to leave because this is terrible. We got to say we can't go against Ami because these guys aren't who they say they are. So like he tried, and of course that backfired. Meg was like, no, I got to stay and do this. And so for someone like Rip, and especially when you put yourself back into that era of thinking in the mid 90s, like Rip was a guy who like, he never wanted to try because it was never going to work, right? There's no point in trying. And then the one time he did try, it failed. And so it was like, well, I guess I'm done with that. And so I did like at the end there that he was the one that found Meg, because they needed Meg ultimately to pull this final trigger to blow the house up. So I'm glad he got a little moment there. Meg is a tough one. Meg's a tough one because
she just went evil so quickly.
Yes, and I think I don't think it's the problem. I don't think it's a problem with her character. It's because she's doing this for her band, right? And everything we saw of her band, like they really sucked.
Yes.
Like there was no redeeming quality. So it's like, why are you doing this for these guys that were like obviously shown as being terrible? Like not just being like dicks and just being punks and being rude and all that. Like the one dude pulled a knife, like they're looking
on one hand, I'm like, I think this is the old man in me when I think this way about them. Cause I'm like, oh yeah, my friends in middle school and high school were dumb, and I was ride or die for them.
And I think, yes, I think that is the fact that because they were her band.
Yeah, that's right. Like there's no other reason needed.
And that's probably a true character note, but it is a tougher look for Meg, because like she can find some redemption or some sort of solace in her soul about the way she acted, like the actual things she did. She can reckon with that. But the fact it's just more like it tweaks her motivation. The fact that she's doing it because her band, and then like at the end too, when they're like, hey, in the end, after we pull this trigger and we're ghosts and we're gone, like you're back with your band again. And it's like, yeah, that's great. Oh, wait, your band sucked though. Like we, the reader, didn't get anything out of them that they were worthwhile. Not saying they deserve to die, because I'm not saying people deserve to die in that way, because yeah, they're just a bunch of idiot kids. But also, like, you didn't give us a reason really to say why they were worth hanging around. But you are right though, 100% that it is true to a kid like that their motivation would be, these are my guys, this is my family, this is my band. The same way that Rip, Buzz, and Ami are, right? It's a bunch of lost kids who find themselves, who find some group, some sort of found family, in whatever form that takes. In this case, it's a band. And regardless, or maybe even in spite of whatever flaws you see in them, you're still with them. So yeah, I can see it. I guess I'm not saying I don't understand it. It is just a harder look for any sort of redemption on Meg. She's in my book a little on the edge in terms of like, well, did she need to be redeemed like that? But ultimately, in the larger view of the ending, I really liked it. I liked it. It was a fitting. I can see a number of ways in which this book ends poorly. Like you make a lot of bad decisions to end this.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I'm not saying this is like the only way it could have gone, but I think this is really fitting. Because it, like you say, I guess, again, I didn't read it your way, but now that you said it, it makes total sense that it's pretty clear these kids all have to die. And so then it comes down into the manner in which they die. Right.
Does their death accomplish anything? Or
yes.
is
it yeah. Or is it just exactly, which is maybe that's why I'm thinking, maybe why I was thinking or feeling that I was glad that no one specifically died in the battle, right? No one sacrificed themselves in that giant battle at the end, because that just feels trite and played out, and yes, Rip takes shrapnel in the side there, but that's after having stepped in and gone down and done his little side quest with Buzz.
Also, I know there's no way this was an intended thing, but you've almost said Rip was torn multiple times, and I was like, Rip torn. That's a 90s. Yeah, 90s reference for me accidentally. If I came close to saying that, or if I had said it, that would have been completely unintentional. But thanks for making aware of it, so I can avoid it now. I appreciate that. Yeah, give that a wide berth.
Yeah. Well, steer clear of that pretty hard. But yeah, so I guess, so the ending itself, you also seem pretty good with it, right?
I liked it a lot. I thought for a book that I think could have very easily gone off the rails. So my only complaint is that there's never any explanation of the narration. And it's like, I guess there's the sense that like there's all these kaijus coming out of the water still. So it's like, I kind of thought the spirits would all kind of be released when the house was destroyed, like to go on, as it were, whatever that means, in this world. And it seems like, no, these ghosts are immortal and they're around forever. I thought like if they processed their trauma or acted on it in some way, they would eventually be released and free.
Freed, yeah.
And it seems like that's not really part of the mechanics here, because then I started playing with the different ideas of like where this could go had this kept going. And one of them would have been, instead of, well, obviously the government's going to be trying to harness the ghosts as long as there's money and weapons to be had there. But if like a different type of group, Ghostbusters, were doing like trauma therapy, like trying to track down ghosts, have them tell their stories, see if there's anything that can be done to resolve it. And you go and like liberate ghosts that way.
Which is what.
And then the end of that series would be the revelation that maybe we should be doing this type of like traumatic recovery work before they're dead. Like maybe we should build a society that doesn't traumatize people en masse.
Well, that'd be
Which would have
wonderful.
been a great
Yes.
ending. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I got the sense, I mean, so right at the end there, right after they kind of step through the portal, and we get that beautiful art change, right? Or right
Yeah.
at the end there when it's a little more rough, not as clean, little heavier lines, looks a little more punk, I guess, a little more DIY. I get a sense in that narration there that like that is where Ami is speaking from, that these ghosts still exist out there. They're out there, but they have been freed and they've chosen to do this. Right. Because the line she ends with is this idea of like, where all the unleashed ghosts of America will go and do what they will. Right. Like, I wonder what will happen to them now, whether it'll change anything at all. So it's like they freed themselves and they freed the other ghosts in the James house, but they also let loose all the ghosts that the nuclear bastard had trapped or used as fuel, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost like they got their resolution, and so they're free. They're not gone, they're still around somewhere, and it appears they're in some sort of, I don't know, some sort of idealistic afterlife for ghosts. So yeah, maybe there is a sense of like there is a chance for redemption or reclamation or healing of some sort, and that allows you to move on, and maybe not move on, but maybe not want to cause harm.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it is. And so that's where I got the sense that where Ami was narrating from was whatever this afterlife is that they are now, after they've destroyed the James house, after they, the four of them have walked hand in hand into the light there, and they're just in some dingy basement somewhere playing a show.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I did love that, at the end when there's like this whole movement around them, the gatekeeping there still at the end about like,
Yeah.
just like this crowd is insufferable.
Yeah.
Like even after all of this, and like everyone supports this band because they were doing
Yeah.
X,
Yeah.
Y, and Z before whatever. And it's like,
Yep.
you guys just can't have nice things.
Yeah. Yeah. But though I did like that coda is so fun though, because again,
It was awesome.
because it's note perfect, because that's, if you play this tape out to the end, right? You're like, let's say this actually happened and you found out about these bands. Like, I know those three kids on the rooftop. I know those kids too, because those kids are much closer to my age, right? Because what was that? Hold on, I got to pull it back up here again.
1998. It ended on a very specific date. It was like, I don't know, June 8th, 1998 or something. And I was like,
I think they you have jumped like basically 3 or 4 years in the future, right? And I connect with that because it's like, as I was saying, like, the characters in this book are a few years older than I am, but these kids on the roof, like,
yeah,
the kids at the end of high school that I know those people, the people on the back end, the ones that missed the scene. And I think it is also kind of indicative when you look at how those three kids are dressed, right? Like, these kids are clearly friends, right? But they don't look like they belong together.
right.
And yet they do, because that was the vibe kind of back then, because we had missed this scene that Buzz and Rip and Ami were a part of. And so this is like the back end of it. And you're right. It's the same sort of thing of just like, yeah, you're still judging things the same way. You're looking at, is this real? Is this authentic? Is this any good? Yada, yada, yada. It's like the same cycle over again, even though you have a world where ghosts are real and they're inhabiting these structures and whatnot. That felt incredibly true. Cause yeah, I know all of those kids.
Yeah. They all seemed familiar to me.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like this, and I would have been, I mean, 98, I was either late elementary or probably seventh grade.
Middle school. Yeah. So you're just,
So like there
you're
was
just even a few
some
years
of
younger.
that,
Yeah.
what like, okay, so the seventh graders my age who had an older brother in 11th or 12th grade.
Yeah.
And it's like
Yeah.
they get all their music from them. They're cooler
Hmm.
than the rest of us
Hmm.
because they have access to, especially like, we had internet, but we didn't really have internet the way that we have internet now.
Yeah.
Like,
It
if you
was still
found out
dial
about a
up.
cool band, you still found out about it from someone in person,
Yeah.
possibly
And that,
someone on the street team handing out cassettes.
yeah. And that person was, and some of your age, you're right. You wouldn't have found it from that person. You would have found out from someone else who found out from someone else. And that someone else was probably someone's older sibling.
Yep.
So you were multiple steps away. And said for you, that person with the older brother, that would have been me, the person who's in 10th,
Yes.
11th, 12th grade in the late 90s. That would have been me and my friends. But yeah, we talked about this a little less, mostly in that first episode, a couple weeks ago, with volume one, just the sense of how they have portrayed this time period and the specificity of it, and how they've hit that level of nostalgia where it's less about, like, there are obviously a lot of specific things, but it's so much more about like the vibe and feel. And it's like, if you were there, you understand this.
Yeah.
You recognize the attitude, you recognize the clothes, the dress, things like the posture, the way people talk and treat each other. It doesn't have to be exactly, again, that like Stranger Things thing of like, you're going to know it's the 80s because we're going to put every 80s reference that everybody knows in every shot. We're not doing that here. They're not constantly talking about, like Nirvana or Pearl Jam.
Right.
They're
or even
not.
the more obscure, what do they call them? Like pet rocks or,
Yeah. They're not. They're not
Chia
called.
Pets.
Yeah, they're not calling out specific things to say, hey, look at the 90s. But it is still in my mind, it's hard for me to escape that this book is still in some way a commentary on the scene in the 90s. It's not quite a rebuke of that, but I think it's close, because I think the thing that really strikes me about the end is the lack of irony. Because the end, well, not the end, the end for our main characters, the end between when Ami, Buzz, and Rip talk to Meg and tell her like what has to be done, and Meg's like, great, then I'll be free and go, and they're like, oh wait, you don't know, right? And that's when the reveal is that, hey man, everyone here is dead, and we're not doing this for us, we're doing this because we have to do something, and this is what we can do, and this is a sacrifice on our end. That's an incredibly earnest ending. Like the ending is quite literally the friends we made along the way.
Yeah.
And that much earnestness, that true authenticity to emotion and feeling flies in direct competition with the attitude of the early mid 90s, where everything was done ironically, right? Nothing, and forget about genuine, what we thought was genuine and authentic, because no one was truly, if you were being earnest, right? If you were being authentic in yourself, you're being in your feelings, as you would say now, to be that vulnerable was a sign of weakness, and that was rejected. And so the fact that ends up being, and it's something that all of these characters would have rejected in volume one. They never would have acted that way. They never thought that way, regardless of how they cared about each other as friends, as bandmates, or whatever. They would have never had that kind of interaction, because that wasn't the world. That wasn't what just kind of societal norms were, especially for kids at that time. And so the fact that Dan Watters and Caspar Wijngaard here at the end of their book has said, no, this is the thing that overcomes. This is what the larger meaning is. This is how we can move on and come together and how we can make things better. I have a hard time seeing that as anything other than a direct shot back at themselves potentially. And I don't know exactly their ages, but like a shot back at those kids who are now nearing middle age as adults now,
Right.
to look back and be like, hey, no, once again, maybe we got it wrong back then. Maybe this was the answer. And if we had done that back then, maybe we're in a better place now.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it does capture, that's a good catch with the irony of it all, because that type of irony has been gone on the wholesale, like pop culture level for 20 years now. I mean, we've been in the post irony culture,
Mm-hmm.
which is where you get into things ironically, but then also kind of like them.
Yeah.
And the line between irony and sincerity is very muddled, because you can still have, if you get criticized for liking something, you can fall back on the, oh, I'm watching this ironically. But if someone is genuine, then you can lean into your genuine love of it.
But there also is there is definitely that. I 100% agree. And part of that, I think, is just the prevalence of connectivity through social media, right? That everyone can have an opinion, everyone can have a show, everyone can throw it out there. And there's constant feedback for that too.
And
right?
you will never receive universal praise in those settings, which means you have to have your shields up.
Mm-hmm.
So you always have to have a healthy level of ironic detachment.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think you end up flying in the middle. You can't have full ironic kind of a view on things, but also to be completely earnest and genuine in that way, you get called out for being cringe, right? People don't like that because what that means. Cringe is another word again for authentic, for real, for someone showing true emotion and true feeling, and other people look at that and be like, "Dude, what's wrong with you?" Like, be cool, man. And it's like, well, no, like we are eliminating that from society on one end, and also, maybe it's probably a good thing we're not engaging with things ironically, because that's just kind of again that's saying I'm going to actively be involved with this thing, but at a distance.
Right.
So so if that's your whole ethos, then you've got nothing there. So you're right. It is kind of on both sides where we've kind of eliminated that, and it's affected the way that I think an entire generation or so of people, I was going to say kids, some of them still are kids. A lot of them aren't kids anymore. But it's affected a way that I think you look at younger millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, like how they interact with culture and society has been affected by this kind of leveling off of like, you can't be too into something, but you can't also just be a hater,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, now I also think one of the reasons it is now so lame to get to be a pure hater of something is that in the 90s, you had 60 channels of TV and maybe a VCR, but no DVR. And if something was in the cultural zeitgeist and you didn't like it, like if you didn't like the show Friends, it hit you over the head everywhere you went, and there was no avoiding it in a sense. So to be a hater of a popular thing gave you something to talk about in every single room.
Yeah.
Whereas in this world, it's just like there are 4 billion streaming services and shows. If you don't enjoy it or enjoy it ironically, why are you doing it at all? Like, you're just troll watching now, which there's certainly that.
What you're saying, I think, is it's the lack of monoculture, right? is
Yes,
the loss
yes.
of that.
And this was the
There's
celebration of the
no,
monoculture because
yeah,
punk doesn't even work without a monoculture, right? Like, what is there to
yes,
rebel against?
100%. That's where I was going. This idea that in order to be anti something, there has to be something to be anti against. And you're right. In current day, when there are limitless options, like why are you choosing just to be a hater on this? You know, like go find the thing that you like. And that is both good and bad in my mind, because it allows people to go find their scene, right? Whatever their niche corner is, they can find that and be a part of that and thrive in that and maybe find themselves and find their best version of themselves. But what it eliminates is any sort of interaction between these groups. And so then you start getting into that echo chamber that everyone talks about, right? You get into that bubble of just kind of recursive thought, recursive ideas, and everybody's so siloed off. And so I see the good and the kind of the pros and the cons of that. But yeah, this ironic 90s attitude of being against everything, you're right, it just doesn't fly anymore. Like it was never going to last. And it didn't even, we talk about being in the 90s, it only lasted for like 3 or 4 years in the 90s anyway. You know, like it didn't start in the, we're talking like 91 to about like 94, 95. And then by then we've entered a new era. And so even at the end of this book with those 3 kids on that rooftop in 1998, I mean, like that's the vapors, the fumes of this scene. Like the world is, from a culture standpoint, is radically different in 1998 than it was in 1995. You know, it is the things that are popular, you know, the things that culture was pointing at and looking at were just radically different. So this era that we're talking about is so specific, and it really is a short time period. But again, those kids all grew up to be the adults we have now that are in their, you know, the early 50s, probably late 40s, early 50s. And yeah, what it's kind of like looking back and be like, well, what do we have to show for this?
Right.
What did it lead to? And I think what Watters and Wijngaard are kind of saying is like, yeah, maybe, you know, maybe it's less about specific things that haven't been done, but more just like, hey, maybe let's look back at what we did there. Maybe that wasn't the way to go. You know, this idea of disassociating, of stepping away from society. Maybe that wasn't the right way to go, because what you're left with are, I guess in this case, like all these ghosts, the ghosts of America. They really do go hard against America in this book.
They do,
especially at the end.
None of them are
specific. Yeah,
unfair.
Oh no.
But that
absolutely not.
Like there was like that sense of vitriol in there that made it sound like, I don't know. It was almost by implication like we're the only country that does bad stuff.
Yeah,
you know, internally, and it's just like, well, that's not true.
Yeah, that's a real tough one from some Brits. That's a real tough one.
To be fair, in his lifetime, in our lifetimes,
yes,
I do think Britain has the upper hand, and they have, a couple thousand more years of baggage to deal with than we do.
Yes.
So it's like, anytime you're judging a 1,500-year-old institution versus a about to be 250-year-old one. Like by definition, he should have more cultural baggage, but also in the last 50 years, I think we take the cake.
Well, yes, since the emergence,
which is what I mean, they're talking about here. Like all of this, they're not going back to the Civil War or the Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
Like this is all 20th century stuff that, like, I mean, I remember like in AP US history, there was a kid in my class who read about the Trail of Tears for the first time ever. And he brought it up every week for the rest of the class. Like his whole personality was like rocked and defined by like this one egregious thing. Yeah. And I'm like, yes, I had also learned about it for the first time. I didn't think it was okay. I'm not pro Trail of Tears or anything like that. But I'm like, I think you're losing perspective here. This probably isn't even in our top 10 atrocities. I mean, like,
That's what I was thinking. I was
right,
like,
but like,
no, that's I was thinking the
it's
same
so
thing.
wrong
Like,
to rank like the
I know.
suffering.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, it's like absolutely horrible. Perhaps he like looked into it and found that he had a personal tie to it in some way. Um,
Maybe so, maybe so, and then that would make sense. Then, if so, I'm not going to dunk on that guy. But you are right. This idea of yeah, you can learn these things and maybe for the first time, and it does rock you. But then, like, so what happens when you learn the next bad thing we did? Because you know what? There's going to be a next. There is and was the next bad thing, and there's probably going to be another bad thing after that. You know?
well, and it's like someone who just read Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Like they just finished reading it
Yeah,
and they now think they have all the secret knowledge.
yeah,
Um, and I read that book and I enjoyed that book, but there were times in there where I was like, it feels like he was like, all the stuff out there is propaganda. So I'm going to write the other side's propaganda. And it's like, I don't think
yes,
two sides of propaganda is the solution,
yeah.
no matter what cable news tells you.
Yes, it's just because you're saying the opposite of what the mainstream is doesn't mean you're true, right? Doesn't mean you're factual. Doesn't mean you're right. Just being the opposite, being just because you say you're saying the thing that no one is going to say, it doesn't mean you're 100% right. Doesn't mean
Well,
you're
just
wrong
because
either.
you have exposed their lie does not necessarily mean
Yes,
that you have the truth.
yes, that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So it's
Sorry.
like you are correct that what they told you is incomplete or wrong,
Mhm.
but that does not make your assertion more true. Just because you took them down a peg.
Yeah. So
Uh,
as
what's the newsroom quote? He's like, they went down a peg, we didn't get taller.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. I was scrolling through. I was trying to find the line I was thinking of about America, and it's during the fight. It was earlier in the volume than I thought it was. Rip and Buzz are talking with Ami, and Ami is in the house, controlling the house, and they're they're asking her like, hey, what happened to Meg? Where'd she go? Blah blah. And she's like, did you stop her? And Ami says, no chance, guys. She's not in control. She's not going to stop that machine. It's America incarnate. It began with an actual goal, but now it's got a taste. It's going to feast, and it's not going to stop. And that feels like a really pointed
yeah,
20th
no,
century, 21st century look at America. This idea of, oh, you guys, through a number of circumstances,
what
some
year
that
did
weren't
this
under
book come out
control.
again? 2020?
At this point, where we are it ended in early 2022. Hold on, let me pull up here.
Yeah, no, this is all fair.
Yeah, so
I'm like, if this book were set in the 90s and written in the 90s, it'd be like,
yeah,
calm down.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. So yeah, these issues here, 11 through 15, starting in January 2022. So yeah, we are it, at this point, and as we've talked about over
fashionable
these
to dunk on
discussions.
America.
Yeah,
ever
yeah,
since
yeah,
2016.
yeah, and the fact this book started in late 2020, not aware, hard to tell how much of current day was going into those early issues, but as this book is being written and published throughout 2021, it's hard to see how the current the situation that was then wouldn't have played into the ideas that they were working on in this book. Like there has to be an influence of present day looking back again 30 some odd years in the past and being like, hey,
Yeah, I mean that.
I'm saying like this is what you're going to become, and using that future knowledge to comment on the way the world was back then, and it still not feel out of place.
There's a literary term for that. I think that's called well, it's a literary or psychological term called backshadowing, where it's
Sure,
a little
yeah,
bit like what's the proper hawk? post hoc ergo propter hoc.
Yeah, yeah,
After therefore because, where backshadowing is where you look back at what happened and realize and believe that, like, well, my individual actions didn't matter because everything that happened is like what would have happened anyway. Like this was all inevitable. It's kind of a fatalistic worldview. But I mean, I think he's obviously looking back at the 1990s in America from the 2020s. The only question is, to what extent is that filter intentional?
yeah,
It is impossible to put yourself in a vacuum where you're not writing from 30 years later.
yeah.
The only question is that point part of his point, or was he trying to put himself as much as possible in the 90s? And we can just see the cracks in that.
And it was just osmosis. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, again, I mean, it's exceptionally hard here because this book has a through line on the commentary on America, like the ghosts of America, quote unquote, albeit a very specific set of ghosts, because we got a lot of ghosts in this country, but this was very specific relative to like nuclear testing.
Right.
But so the fact that there's a commentary on that, as being a major through line in the story, it is hard to imagine, for me at least, that current day circumstances as this book was being written, like, has to filter through the sentiment, the mindset, everything you were thinking and feeling. I'm sure as someone like Dan and Caspar, who are not American, who are not from the US, looking outside in, I can't imagine how it doesn't filter back in as you're writing, as you're typing the words "Ghosts of America," right? As you're putting that on paper and talking about basically the not the original sins, but some of the sins of this country, and the things that were covered up, the things that were lost, the things that were left behind. I don't see how you can't write a story about that and not have the most recent examples of this country denying and burying and leaving behind filter in.
Right. I believe so I assume you read the backup matter in volume 3.
Yes. Yeah.
Where you get, the different character designs and the punk aesthetic and, all the different logos I thought were very cool. The different types of trying to make things look like a 90s punk rock poster that someone printed at Kiko's. I can't imagine these guys have the punk mentality and limit it to American culture, right? It's just these guys would criticize and pick apart and rebel against any culture you put them in. However, Image Comics is based out of the US. I think we have to have the world's largest share of comic readers. So it's like, so you said it here. And the punk movement was here, right? I mean, there's punk other places, but
this era, I think it for it to be two non-Americans to create this book and want to explore this time frame, that level of intentionality just tells me that there was something they were trying to say specifically about maybe again the time period, and maybe it was easier for them to filter their thoughts through a foreign culture, right?
Yes.
Maybe it's too close for them.
I think that's actually fair.
That it allows them a level of removal,
or maybe a bit of music they're listening to. If they were listening to American punk,
could have been too. Yeah.
What were our American punk bands singing about?
Yeah, that could be it too.
I mean, it could be as simple as that. Just to say, like, this is a love letter to the punk bands we love. I mean, I remember I met this punk kid when I was in high school. He was also in high school, but in Mexico, and he had a was it a JanSport backpack? The really prominent backpacks.
Oh, sure. Yeah, probably JanSport. Yeah.
And it was like he had Sharpie and he had just written the names of bands.
Yeah.
And they were 95% American bands.
Sure. Yeah.
And somebody said, like, why are these all American bands? He's like, this is the best music. He's
that's the
culture. And I think it was kind of like don't really like your country, your culture, maybe not even your people, certainly not your food, but man, your music, like your
Yeah,
music, your movies.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's like, yeah, I think our greatest export as a country has been our pop culture.
It's I mean, yeah. I was going to say art in general, but yeah, pop culture is probably better because that extends beyond just the creative process. I agree. And that's still also for better for worse because I think we've exported some pretty useless junk. Um, but but on the whole, I think you're probably right. I think you're probably right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so the rest of this book is basically, um, you start with this huge mech fight,
Mhm.
um, that presumably is just going on the entire volume.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I don't find that type of action very compelling. Like I just need a few pages and panels and maybe one big splash. But like the endless, they're just pounding each other. Neither of them can win. I'm like, why am I reading this? I
Well,
was like, if this whole trade is this battle, this is gonna suck.
yeah.
But then you get the side quest, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah. You get the thing of like, yeah, we're still going over here. Don't mind. I like the idea that there was the one panel there where like the army came in and then they realized they couldn't do anything, and so like there's a panel of them just like sitting on the hoods of their trucks and things like that, just being like, well, just make sure no one else gets hurt. So that idea that like it almost becomes mundane, but I'm with you totally that like if this whole thing had been just a giant battle for 5 issues, you lose interest in that. And so the fact that you get these side quests, and we also got the history of the ghosts in the house. Although I don't think we ever got the lamp lady, but we did get. They kind of went out of their way to explain all of the ghosts in the house, which I thought was interesting. I don't think that was necessary. It wasn't necessary for me, but I found it interesting, but I didn't find it necessary.
Yeah. So I think my preferred format would have been if they were dropping those as 5 page long backup matter for the whole series. To
Oh,
say
like
there's 15
not
issues,
narrative,
right?
not narrative.
Not
Oh, interesting.
narrative, and you're just picking up more information of the history of who's in the house. Some of them you met before, some of them you haven't met yet, but you're just kind of building a library of like, here's all the ghosts in the story
Just like a
as you
character
go.
sheet at the back, that kind of
Not,
thing.
not yes, like a
Yeah.
character sheet at the back, but like that 5 page story about the clock guy.
Oh,
Like just have that
actual story, not
have
just
that
like
be a backup
text.
matter. Yes. Right. Have
I
like
got you. I
the end
got
of
you.
the issue at page 19, 5 pages of like, here's a random ghost story. Here's another random ghost story. Here's a random ghost story. And then you get to the story where all the ghosts converge and you're like, none of those were random ghost stories.
Oh,
They're all here. They're all part of this house
that
and
could have
they're
been
all
fun.
tied to
Yeah, that the James
Jacob,
house. Yeah,
James.
yeah.
Yeah.
That could be fun. I could see that. That could be fun. That could be cool. That could be cool. Um,
It just
yeah,
puts a lot of burden on readers, especially in the monthly format.
yeah, yeah.
That's a very like 2000s Vertigo type thing of like,
Uh,
we've got you, you're
yeah.
here. We're gonna do a long going run and we're just gonna build a library style knowledge. But I mean, what like the Unwritten was doing like one interstitial at the end of each series, or at the end of each trade, right? Where it was like
For a segment they did that. Yeah, yeah, and they had like the .5 issues and
the
things
point
like
five
that.
issues and
Yeah, yeah. So
Lord knows all of the spin-off material and things like that from a long going series like Fables
mhm, mhm,
and
mhm. But yeah, I think you can do that when you're getting into like the 30s, 40s, and 50s in a book. 15 issues I think is a little tougher, but I do like the idea of I conceptually I like the idea of getting the backstory, just an isolated story about how this ghost came to be, and then seeing them all in the house. But then I guess you're in the other part of the house though. Then it's just revealed like how they like physically work in the house, which again, like figuring out like how the house moved and how it didn't, like the fact that there's physics in this house, like I really didn't need that personally. Like,
yeah, there were some extraneous details.
yeah,
Um,
again, like I shouldn't have to worry. The house shouldn't have to worry about friction and catching a fire. It's already a magical being, right? So again, that's one of those things. It's like, okay, it's cool you guys put thought into that, and I appreciate learning that. But like, did you have to put thought into that? Couldn't you have just said it's magic? Because we already got ghosts inhabiting objects. Like, why isn't that enough? You know? So, but again, it doesn't detract from me. It is just one of those things. You're like, okay, well, you put. I appreciate the effort, that the level of thought that went into that. But yeah, I don't think it was necessary to the story. It was. I read that and was like, oh, that's cool, that's interesting, and then moved on. You know, like it didn't cause me to be like, oh, that's so sick how the ghost, moved the house. You know what I'm saying? Like it didn't
Right.
trigger any further thoughts. It was just like, huh, okay. And that was it.
Yeah. That's about it for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then the whole quest in the tunnel stuff was like
Yeah.
very cool art.
Yeah.
I spent a little bit more time down there than I felt I needed to, but I also knew like where we were in the story.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, we're gonna recover, the last piece, the toilet
Yeah.
seat. What was like, okay, it was actually worth the side quest just for the line at the end of issue, I don't know, 13, where it was like, my bandmates were on a quest to retrieve a stolen toilet seat,
Yeah.
for the fate of the world or
Yeah.
something like. It's just like if that were the line that he had in his head and was like, okay, now I have to write an entire story to get to that
We're
line
gonna
and
work
earn
backwards.
it. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
gonna work like that would have been amazing. But yeah, that was really good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think you're right. That there is this thing of like, it is a side quest, but again, it is a side quest that is more interesting than what's happening in the main story. Because again, the main story still is a big fight, right? Yeah. So only so many panels we can have for that, and so the fact that they can shift their narrative, and we can get some we get more from Rip, and I think that's obviously it's a story for Rip, right? Because again, Buzz, I think we know who he is, and as we talked about, he's kind of like the one fairly decent person who's kind of soul isn't really tainted, but getting to have Buzz kind of have Rip have a moment there of like really facing all of his fears and have that really manifest for him and allow him some growth. That I think helps when we get to the end and they're in the house, right? There's been a bit of reconciliation between the band now. The fact that he hasn't been there with them, and so from a character standpoint, I did like that they found a way to put a little work in on Rip before any sort of hard turn at the end, which, as we kind of talked about earlier, they kind of didn't do with Meg. They didn't really have space to do that with Meg. She makes a turn at the end because she has nothing else that she can do as she's trapped in the house, like in those tunnels there. So I can, once again, I can appreciate the effort that they put into to show some growth in a character that has otherwise been pretty stagnant for 12 issues,
Yeah.
And has been,
that's no joke. Yeah.
Yeah. Rip had been he had been kind of the worst character of the band. He was that guy in the band, in that friend group, as it were. So it's just to have them be able to put some work in, and again, not redeem him and make him like all noble and great, but just find a little more depth and a little more humanity, and have him open up and and kind of get his eyes widened a little bit. I thought that was worthwhile and good. And again, it takes us away from just them drawing two giant mechs fighting each other over and over again. You know, and it also, they found a way to get a little more history of the James house, because you find out the toilet seat is his daughter, right? I'm going to say the name wrong. Was it Jessica? Juliet. I knew it had it with a J. So this idea that is kind of the the completion. That's our like full Voltron moment there, right? All the ghosts back
Yeah.
together, and it ends up revealing. There's the weird tie that we definitely didn't need. That General Razor's grandfather was the general with the dog who started this whole thing.
Right.
And again, that those are the kinds of story details that again don't need. Found interesting was like, oh, that's great. So his grandfather was the guy with the dog, so that's why Razor is here, because he has a lineage to the first ghosts, which were old James and his daughter, the horseshoe and the toilet seat, weirdly both shaped the same way.
I know, yeah.
But the idea that there was all that connective tissue through all that, again, I didn't need any of that. None of it took away from the story for me, but also didn't add anything for the story for me, and so that's why I can kind of gloss over it when I read that. It's like, okay, you wanted to tie these things together, and that's cool, that's great, but yeah, I don't really need those details. If Razor had just been some random dude who got into this because he thought hacking was cool and ghosts were cool, doesn't change the story for me.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Doesn't change his characterizations at all.
I mean, yeah. So I don't want to communicate that I dislike the characters, but I ultimately did not really care what happened to any of them, because I was here for, like, once they started making broad stroke claims about America's history of trauma and whatever, I was like, oh, so this isn't really a character story, which it seemed like it was early on. But it was an archetypal.
At times it is, yeah.
But it's more like about orphaned punk kids, right?
Yeah.
In general than these specific kids.
You know what? Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You're right. It is more
like all of these are stand-in for, like, yeah, this is who made up the punk movement.
The kids in the foster system, the kids with of divorce, the kids who their dad or mom walked out of their life and never came back. Okay, I can see that. That is true. I did care a little, I guess. I think I cared to see where
in volume 2 I was really caring for Meg. I was like,
okay, yeah,
man, this sucks. Like,
well, that is true. Yeah,
I mean, that, like, she was dealt.
She got the raw
in the series.
Yeah, she got the raw deal. Absolutely. Yeah, I think I did care about where Ami ended up because she was a narrator. So I was
because
of that,
her romantic relationship too. Well, even though it was like, I mean, I thought Buzz had a good point of like, why don't we run as far inland as we can and enjoy as much life as we can?
Yeah.
Since we know this thing's hanging over you. And I think that line also made me think like, oh yeah, there's no walking away from this. Like that, like they're gonna die. I think he knows that Ami will die. Probably he will die. Yeah. So why not enjoy a little bit of life before we all die?
Yeah. And I think
his philosophy. And I'm like, yeah, no, I agree with that. Do that.
That's fair. Yes, but I don't think Ami was wrong. That was at the end of volume 2 for her being like, okay, but like the longer we don't do this, the more harm can happen. So
true,
the idea
and
of,
I would feel
different
if they were playing with a Ouija board and they created this thing, but that's not what happened.
True. But
they did break into the house, which released all of the.
Ami did teach the house how to get up and walk, how to move. She. So she.
I thought that was a funny wording. But
it is very funny. But so there is a level of responsibility there because she thought she was helping the house. And now, so they have inadvertently created something out of it. The house already existed, right? The ghosts already existed. Those objects already existed. But in trying to help and trying to connect with the house, Ami did cause what the house became. So there is some level of responsibility there. And I think that was the message that she was trying to say there on the pier was that, you have, again, with great power must also come great responsibility. Like you can't just walk away from this. You are responsible. And
I mean,
I think
clearly
what you
you're
were
not
saying was,
watching Spider-Man Noir right now if you think
yeah,
because with great
yeah,
power means great comes great
yeah,
responsibility means you can't walk away from something.
yeah,
It's like, well,
yeah,
how about with no power?
yeah. Which is
Yeah.
a line that's been invoked by, I mean, it's been invoked by characters like um Green Arrow has invoked that line over in DC, like with no
Yes.
power comes,
Right.
so like it has been parried. But I think what Ami's trying to say there also, regardless of her responsibility over the house, she is the only one that can interact with it. Whether she can actually control it or not is a different story. But she does know that I'm the only one that has a chance. If we do nothing, the house runs wild. So so if I do nothing, we've lost. If I go in and try to control the house, maybe I can control it, maybe I can't control it, but there's at least a non-zero chance. Even if it's the smallest chance at all, there's a non-zero chance that I can stop this thing. And so that is her responsibility there. The idea that she has this level of power, I can step in and have an effect on this. Whether or not I'm successful is still up in the air, but if I don't try, if I don't put myself out there and attempt it, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for all of us, for any of us, if we don't try and do that? And again, that message kind of being at the core of this book that is set amongst a scene of kids that, on the whole, generally reject the idea of responsibility and what you owe to the larger, the greater good, as it were. I think is fascinating. And I think that's what kind of draws me into this book and into the larger message of what this book, I think, is saying. That it's beyond just dealing with trauma and loss and grief and things like that, that there's a larger commentary about the world that was 30 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I enjoyed, like, this is the right level of nostalgia trip for me. I
Yeah.
will say volume 3, as I was reading Down in the Tunnel, I was like, this is now unambiguously horror. Whatever
Well,
else it is,
yes,
it's punk,
definitely, definitely.
I would call it like punk horror or something like
Yeah,
that in an
I
elevator
think,
pitch.
yeah, yes.
But
When we get to Juliet, there, absolutely, that is 100% a horror book now.
yeah, it's like Tynion level horror, in a sense.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah. That's got very, it's got very World Tree, something's killing the children. Actually, no, it has real Department of Truth energy.
oh
As
yes,
government
yes,
facility,
yeah.
hiding some level of really freaky horror, both psychological and body physical. So yeah, definitely, definitely.
Yeah, so anyway, it got a little too horror for me.
Mhm.
But not a criticism of it. That's just
Mhm.
where my personal taste diverges from what they had a vision for.
Mhm.
Love the perfect dose of 90s nostalgia. And ultimately I feel like it had something to say and it said it pretty well. And in a true punk fashion, it raised the issue to the surface, but it's not a symposium on how to solve the world's problems or
Yeah,
correct America's past.
yeah,
It's making sure everyone has it burnt into the forefront of their mind of like, this is what's wrong with this country, with this world, with this place, with
yeah,
this
yeah,
time.
yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, it's a very punk message. And so
Mhm.
like the message fits the medium and the medium, is well suited to the story here. So, um,
Agreed,
yeah,
agreed.
like very, what's the word? There's like a uh, I wanted to say continuity, but that's not quite the way. Like everything just hangs together. Like they use
Mhm.
the right art style, the right story length, the right type of setting and everything to just have everything play off of each other perfectly. Really well balanced storytelling, I guess is what I'm saying.
That's a good, and I think something now that you said that, go back to something you said earlier about how there are a lot of ways this could have gone off the rails, and part of that is because they're mashing up genres so much, right? Again, we have the specific '90s throwback era. We do have these giant mechs and magical girl transformations. We have this ghost horror, the psychological horror. As you said, we got a little more of kind of the body horror, visual horror going on here. All this stuff thrown together here. Again, all these flavors that probably shouldn't taste well together, but the word you use, balance, I think really applies here in terms of how they were able to kind of find the right amount of the mech stuff with the right amount of the ghost stuff and the right amount of horror, psychological horror, like physical, visual, body horror, gore, with the 90s nostalgia, the era specific music, and like all these pieces there. I think they found a really happy medium, a balance, as you said, of all this stuff. So on paper, all those things look absurd, but in execution, I think it worked out so well. I think that's because Dan Watters and Caspar Wijngaard are really good storytellers.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
and I feel like not to minimize any other artist's contribution to a like creator-owned book, but I feel like Casper's imprint on this was so clear the whole time.
Yeah.
As a co-contributor, because like if you had almost any other artist here, the punk element of it would not have come through in the same way.
I agree. The vibe he creates, again, with his very specific color palette that he uses across, like, if you read the Power Fantasy, the book he does with Kieran Gillen, like you will see similar character designs, the way he uses color, not the exact same types of color palette, but the way he uses it. When there's a harder accent for something, when it's a flat background versus an actual like visual background behind there, the way that he uses color and contrasting colors, warm and cold, kind of light, that kind of contrast is so specific, and it works so perfectly for this book. And I think that is, as much as I love just his line work and his character design, because I love the way that Caspar draws characters and draws faces. I think it's fantastic. His color choices in panel to panel, page to page, adds so much to the storytelling. So again, simply by vibe and feel. The feeling that
if this book were printed in German,
yeah,
you would know. You would guess the decade, the location, the vibe, everything.
You understand the emotion and the feeling. I'm looking at a page at the end here when they're about to walk through this final portal, right? And it's Ami and Meg on the top there. Ami is already kind of in that bluish kind of thing that the ghosts have, and you see Meg is transitioning from the red, the warm, the blood color, right? And it's like that has been dissipating and is transitioning into that kind of light blue. I guess it's kind of that magenta into that cyan, as like that is a transition of her character from who she was with the nuclear bastard and all that, her accepting her fate. And you just see that in this panel of this really hard contrast between that bright magenta and that really kind of cool blue, that blue like cyan blue. And you understand, you feel the emotion in that, and understand the mindset of those characters, of what they're about to do, of what they've accepted to do together as they step into this explosion portal, whatever it is. I don't know what it was that triggers, the explosion of the house that triggers the end game for the story. And so, yeah, just the way that the color is on the page, it is, I know he hasn't done a ton of work, but I've read a lot of it for Caspar Wijngaard. He's just someone that I want to see more of, And I know the Power Fantasy's on a break right now, but Kieran Gillen said they're coming back. Don't know when, but I look forward to when that does come back. Because
Kieran's pretty reliable with those types of promises.
Yes, even if it's something like Die and it takes many, many years, if he says it's coming, it's coming at some point. But I hope, I hope Power Fantasy comes back, and not like 3 years later. But he's just Caspar Wijngaard is someone that the color choices are so specific to him that you can just tell when he's doing a book. And I want to see more of it because anytime there's a book that I can go through and not have to read the words, no shots at writers, but anytime I don't have to read the dialogue and I can just get the sense, like you said, if it's in a different language, it's a book that I love because then it's one that I can just pull up at any time and just flip through and just stare at the art and focus on the little details and the things that maybe you miss as you're trying to read through and digest the story. Trying to get all the parts of what's happening, just to go through and take a look at and marvel at the choices that are made on the page. I love stuff like that. And Caspar Wijngaard is super high up there now for me as just one of my favorite artists working today.
Yeah. Love to see more from him. It would be kind of fun to see a not related in any characters, but a companion series to this that follows high schoolers in my era of early 2000s pop punk Warped Tour type punk.
10 years later, right?
10 years later, but it's like
304, something like that.
And
yeah.
And like those type of things, which I think, my gosh, like I don't think the punk crowd ever accepted pop punk.
No.
Like that was like, it was punk in style, but it was so produced, so poppy, that it really only played for pop.
It was way too popular. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. It wasn't raw.
I think there is, you could make an argument that the coda of this book should have been 10 years later, not 5 years later.
Interesting. Yes.
I think there is because at least in the late 90s, punk bands were still not being played. That was not the scene anymore. We had moved fully into
grunge, post grunge.
Well, it was post grunge. We had moved fully into new metal. Boy bands. Girl groups,
Disturbed,
girl groups, teen pop, and also the rise of like country and hip hop, and then the punk scene that became like your pop punk and your emo punk and your things like that. Even though a band like Green Day that had been there all the time, those groups came with a force in the early aughts. So yeah, it would have been 5 years after that. So I think there's an argument that could be made that you could have had that setting 10 years later versus 5 years later. It would have been an interesting, just kind of academic thought piece of like, what would those kids think of 10 years removed?
Yeah, exactly.
From these. Yeah. That would be fun. That would be fun to kind of think about and extrapolate.
Well, the thing is, it's always on the table. Like anytime they want to come back and do it, they can do it.
It is.
If they've got something else to say.
Yeah, these are guys.
But I think, man, if you did this in 2002 and it was a post 9/11 punk thing, if it was like Green Day's Bullet in a Bible type thing.
Yeah.
And it was okay, Green Day is right on that line of like pop punk, but still very punk in their message. Even though they had been pretty mainstream for a while.
Yes, at that point, almost a decade. Yeah.
Yeah. It would have been, I think there's interesting fodder there, and there's fresh American trauma to rage against, post 9/11.
Sure. Yeah. With, even, Bullet in the Bible, also American Idiot. I mean, like
that's what I was thinking. Bullet in the Bible was the live
it came later.
version of American Idiot. Yes.
Yeah.
I was getting my wires crossed.
But yeah, I mean, I think that there's interesting fodder there, and there is something to the idea that if you've also read the previous book that Dan Watters and Caspar Wijngaard worked on, Limbo, it also has a music bent to it, and so the idea of when these guys work together, there's some sort of musical influence on it. It would be awesome for them if they wanted to come back and like you said, maybe not a direct sequel, but a related kind of story. Or, I mean, honestly, again, anything with these guys, if they want to work together on anything, I'm going to read it, because I think they make a great pair. But again, Dan Watters is, as of currently, like pretty deep over at DC, and Caspar is working on Power Fantasy with Kieran Gillen. But if these guys ever want to reunite and tell another music adjacent kind of story, I'm in all the way. I'm in blind.
Yeah. The last thing I was going to say is as I started reading this book, I was like, oh, is this to punk music what Deep Cuts is to jazz? And
oh, sure. Okay.
It's not quite.
Yeah.
But I suspect lots of elements. I bet there are a ton of punk Easter eggs in here that I missed.
Yes, I'm sure.
Like
same.
Either lyrical references or like band history, like
aesthetic
history
choices,
of the Sex Pistols or something like that.
Yeah.
That I'm
like, I know who Joe Strummer is. Right. I know the names. Yeah, but I'm with you 100% that there is. I'm sure there's an extra level of, I guess Easter eggs of references that I'm sure someone who was of the scene a little more closely probably gets. Yeah. But it doesn't take away from because I think the thing that I enjoy of it is that I connected with the parts that I remember connecting with, and like, I didn't know all those small details back then, so I don't know them now. Right. But I can still connect with the parts I do remember. Those parts still feel true to me.
Well, that's the mark of a good book, is that
yes, it works. Yes.
Like, right. Cause there are bad, like, Marvel and Disney projects where they go Easter egg first and then build a plot around the Easter eggs they want to play with. And it's like,
that's a big two thing. That's a Marvel that's a that is.
I was actually thinking first of Disney. I was not even thinking Marvel. I was like, there is a Disney movie from the last few years that I've watched with my daughter, and it's fine. Like, we like the music or whatever, but it was just like, clearly you had a lot of Easter eggs in mind, and that led the writing room. And then you were like, okay, now we've got all these Easter eggs in place. What's the bare minimum story to connect these things? And it's like, and that's what they did. But I think your hardcore Disney princess fans are just the same as your hardcore MCU fans, where it's like, even when it's not good, it's fine.
Yeah, fandom is fandom.
You gave me something new. It's fine.
Indeed.
And I know that you'll deliver something great again eventually.
Yeah.
So anyway, Homesick Pilots, and I think in very rare fashion we can announce our next Zero in book, and possibly a creator interview. We're going to leave it in suspense.
Let's wait. Yeah. Because that'll happen, but there is always a chance it doesn't happen next.
Fair.
Yeah. So we do have a plan.
Yeah, we're in the weekly
that will
grind.
come next. Yeah, but it may not happen actually next. So, but keep a lookout. You'll find out what the next book is. When it goes up, like always.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. Find us Blue Sky, Instagram, StoriedArcs.com, and we will see you next season, which is next Thursday. Like always.
Peace.